You know that annoying little voice in your head that screams, "Doesn't do that"? When are you about to make the worst decision of your life? So mine decided to take a vacation right on New Year's Eve. And what vacation? See? It was an open bar. Of bad ideas with open food of disastrous consequences. The scene was perfect. Worthy of film. Plank facing the beach, the smell of Syrisus mixed with expensive perfume, and the fireworks reflecting in the eyes of my nephew. Ah, my nephew, that 22-year-old angel who thinks she can challenge her aunt here. Little did he know that I not only enter the rain, but I dance in the storm. The night began with a courage marathon, worth our family's bets, and believe me, those chips are worth more than a lot of car out there. Each challenge, a shot of tequila, and every shot a layer of common sense going away. What started with a kiss on a stranger climbed away that brought me here, telling you this story. His final bet was not only bold, it was a statement of war. And me? I showed that to provoke. You have to know how to deal with the answer. What would you do in my place? Comment down here and already subscribe to the channel. The Marathon of Courage was a dangerous tradition of our family. It started years ago, like a joke between my uncles, but evolved. The rules were simple and diabolical. A challenger proposed proof. The challenge could accept or pass. He accepted and fulfilled. He won a challenging record. If it refused, it had to give you a record. And if it failed in the attempt, it lost. The center of everything was the chips. They were not colored plastic pieces. They were pieces of massive, heavy mahogany with the faking of the family carved by hand on one side and a serial number on the other. They were used as currency in our internal holiday bets. Anyone who finished the night with more chips had the right to ask for a great favor from any family member the following year. A favor that could not be denied. Tequila was the social lubricant and the stupidity accelerator. For each challenge accepted, a shot was mandatory. Not for the challenged, but to everyone at the table. It was a way of ensuring that everyone's inhibitions were dissolving together, creating an atmosphere of complicity and collective insanity. No one could judge because everyone was in the same boat, sinking into alcohol. My nephew, that smile from who knows exactly what he is doing, had accumulated a little fortune in chips that night. He was fast, intelligent, and read people. He knew my pride was my weakness, and I hated refusing a challenge. He was studying me, preparing me for the final blow. And I, blinded by drink and competition, didn't even realize the web he was weaving. His first challenge for me was light, almost a warm-up. I bet a record that you don't have the courage to go down to the sand party and kiss the first flowered shirt you find. The whole table laughed. My cousins looked at me, waiting to see my reaction. Refusing would be a certificate that I was old to the game. I turned the tequila shot that served. The liquid came down, burning and warming my chest. I gave a wink to my nephew and said, "Bet accepted, dear. Prepare your chip." I went down the stairs of the apartment, feeling the tinnitus of alcohol and music. The crowd was a sea of sweaty and happy people, celebrating the turn. It wasn't even 30 seconds for me to see my victim. The boy was tall, tanned, and wore the most tacky and flashy flowery shirt I've ever seen. I approached him, touched his shoulder, and when he turned, I just kissed him. It was fast, confused to him, and triumphant for me. He was left without reaction, with a silly smile on his face, while I just said Happy New Year and turned around. Climbing back to the roof, I arrived at the apartment with a victorious smile. My nephew looked at me with a mixture of admiration and calculation. He pushed the heavy mahogany record on the table toward me. I caught her, feeling her weight in my hand. I had won the first battle. The problem is that easy victory only made me more confident and reckless for what would come next. We played for another hour. Both the challenges were bolder, the most frequent tequila shots. The stack of chips in front of me grew. I was at the top of the world, invincible. It was then that I realized the change in his eyes. The playful shine has disappeared, being replaced by a cold and focused intensity. He was no longer playing. He was hunting. He leaned over the table and the noise of the party seemed to disappear. All eyes turned to him. He took all his remaining chips, a considerable pile, and pushed them to the center of the table. The sound of the wooden pieces hitting each other was the only noise in the silence that settled. "The final bet, Aunt," he said, with a low and firm voice. "Everything or nothing," he continued. All my chips against all yours. The air got heavy. That was no longer a New Year's Eve joke. That was serious. I felt a chill, a brief moment of lucidity that was quickly drowned by tequila and my inflated ego. "What's the challenge?" I asked, trying to keep my voice firm. He lifted his chin toward the glass door to the huge balcony of the apartment, the porch of the third floor which hovered directly on the crowded beach. "Kai, challenge you," he said, and every word fell like a stone. To be completely without clothes for 60 seconds on that porch. The table was absolutely silent. The game had just changed level. A UHH choir and nerve laughs traveled the table. Someone said he freaked out. But my nephew didn't take my eyes out of me. He knew what he was doing. He knew that we fit this, not as a proposal, but as a test to my courage. It was the perfect bait. And I, with a blurred mind, bit the bait in full force. In my head, two voices shouted. One, common sense, almost without strength, whispered that it was crazy, who was humiliating, dangerous, and stupid. He talked about dignity, what the neighbors would think, about the fact that our whole family was there, watching. It was the voice of reason, but the reason was poor. The other voice, however, was a thunder, food by almost a bottle of tequila, the injured pride and the adrenaline of the competition. She screamed that backing off was for the weak, that he was testing me, calling me coward in front of everyone. I was the cool aunt, the fearless woman. How could I yellow now? The stack of chips in the center of the table seemed to shine. "Don't have the courage," he said finally. It was the 4 magic words, the words that turned off my brain once and for all. I looked at the stack of chips, looked at his convinced face, and a slow smile formed on my face. I lifted my empty shot glass. "Serve me one more," I said, looking at my cousin. "And you can start telling my new chips, dear." Rising from the chair was the first part of the challenge. The world turned for a second, and I supported myself on the table. My family's laughs and encouragement was a distant and distorted noise. My total focus was on the glass door. Each step towards him seemed to take eternity, as if I were walking underwater. My nephew didn't say anything else. He just watched me, with that same cold and calculating look. He got up and went to the corner of the room near the mirror, giving me his back, but I knew he was watching me by the reflection. That gave me a strange shiver, but tequila told me it was just the emotion of the moment. As I walked, the reality of the situation began to want to infiltrate the mist of alcohol. The cold breeze that leaked through the door, crack. The sharp sound of the crowd below, singing and celebrating, oblivious to the private spectacle that was about to take place on the third floor. For a moment, I thought of coming back, saying it was a joke. But then I looked back and saw all the faces staring at me. The expectation was palpable. I couldn't go back. It would be a much greater humiliation than anything I could do on that porch. I took a deep breath, smelling the salt and gunpowder of the fires. My hand touched the cold door handle. It was the time. I opened the door and sound of the beach party hit me in full force. It was a 1,000-voices monster. The night's wind was cold and wrapped my body instantly, causing a shock that left me sober for a microsecond. I closed the door behind me, isolating myself from the heat and safety of the apartment. I was alone. I took off my clothes quickly, piece by piece, the fabric seeming to burn my skin. Each item that fell to the floor was a step without a return. Finally, naked, I approached the glass railing. My hands trembled as I leaned them on the cold surface. Down below, an ocean of light points of cell phones and lighters. Thousands of people. None of them looking at me, but the feeling was that all the eyes of the universe were spiked on my back. The first second looked an hour. Time dragged on. The wind whistled in my ears. I felt absurdly exposed, vulnerable, but I also felt a wave of bizarre power. I was doing something no one there would have the courage to do. Winning. I started counting on my head. Deck 20. 30 seconds. The cold started to get more intense. Fear began to give way to a kind of numbing euphoria. I looked to the sky. The last fireworks that exploded in vibrant colors, 45, 50. When I arrived in 60, I didn't wait for another second. I grabbed my clothes from the floor and dressed up clumsy, my heart hitting my throat. I achieved. I opened the door back to the apartment with a crash. The hot air and the smell of alcohol welcomed me like an old friend. A celebration shout exploded. In the room, My cousins were standing, applauding and whistling. I had done I had silenced my nephew's mouth and won the most insane bet on family history. I walked back to the table, feeling the queen of the world. My hair was messed up with the wind, my goosebumps, but I carried the arrogant and satisfied smile that I could produce. I took the tequila bottle and served a shot for myself, turning it once in a theatrical gesture. The victory was sweet, and my nephew was still in the same place in the corner of the room. He was not applauding. He was quiet, just watching me with an expression that I couldn't decipher. It wasn't a loser's face. There was something more there. Something my drunk mind couldn't sue. I ignored the warning sign. Just wanted my chips. So I said aloud that everyone would hear. I think we have a winner here. Where's my prize? I pointed to the stack of chips that would now be mine. The feeling of power was intoxicating, almost as strong as tequila. I had proven I had gone further than everyone. As soon as I knew, my victory was actually the beginning of my greatest defeat. As I enjoyed my moment of glory, something caught my attention. A small shine on the other side of the room. So I was coming from the dresser next to which my nephew was still. It was my cell phone. I had left him early to carry, but he was not lying down. I was leaning on a book with the camera turned exactly toward me. Ice traveled my pimple, a cold feeling that had nothing to do with the porch wind. I frowned, trying to focus my vision. There was a small red light, throbbing in the upper corner of the screen. A light I knew very well. The light that indicates that the device is recording a video. Time seemed to stop. The sound of the party, the laughter, all disappeared. My brain suddenly was sober, painfully sober. He was not just watching me by the mirror reflection, he was filming me. He had filmed everything. The walk to the porch, the hesitation, and undoubtedly, the 60 seconds I was out there. My gaze jumped off his cell phone to his face. And that's when I saw it. The expression I had not been able to decipher before was now clear as the day. It was a smile of pure and absolute victory. Not the smile of those who lost a bet, but the smile of those who just won the whole game. And I, the supposed queen, was just a pawn in her board. I walked slowly toward him, my heavy body like lead. "What did you do?" My voice came out like a hoarse whisper. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. The party around us continued, but we were both in a bubble of tension, invisible. To others, he took my homeless cell phone with a terrifying calm. He slid his finger on the screen and showed me the video. The image was clear. Me on the porch. It was unmistakable. I felt the air miss in my lungs. "Erase it." Now, I ordered, trying to sound authoritative, but my voice trembled. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The bet of the chips was just warming ant. The real bet begins now. He turned his cell phone to himself, typed something quickly, and then turned it back to me. He had just posted the video. I don't know where, which social network, but it was online. And then he pronounced the sentence that sealed my destiny. "The rules are simple," he said, bringing my face closer to mine. "Every like this video has, you fulfill a new challenge with me. A challenge of my choice. No chips, no tequila. Only you and me. And if you refuse," he paused, letting the weight of words sit. "I share this with Grandma, with Uncle Roberto, with everyone." The word blackmail exploded in my mind. I was paralyzed. My mind spinned, trying to find a way out, a flaw in his plan. But there was none. He had absolute control. Public humiliation. Against fulfilling their wills. He had created the perfect arrest, and I had entered her free and spontaneously drunk by my own pride. "You are a monster," I managed to say, the words coming out with difficulty. He shrugged, as if my moral judgment were completely irrelevant to him. His eyes went down my body, analyzing me in a way I had never done before. It was not a nephew's gaze to an ant. Was a predator's gaze to his prey. He approached even more until I could feel his breath, the smell of tequila and youth. "The game starts right now," he whispered, and his voice was silk and poison. "We don't have to wait for the first, let's consider this as a free sample, so you can understand how things will work from today." Gaze set out on mine. "The first challenge," he said slowly, savoring each syllable. "It's here. Now you're going to touch a place in my body where I never let anyone play. The absurdity of the situation, the total reversal of power, hit me as a punch in the stomach. The room, before a place of celebration and celebration, had become my particular hell. Panic was the dominant emotion, a cold and overwhelming panic that threatened to suffocate me. My mind shouted for me to run, scream, make a scandal, and expose that kid in front of the whole family. But his threat was an anchor that held me to the ground. The image of my grandmother, a religious and fragile lady, watching that video was more terrifying than anything he could ask me there. But under panic, there was something more, something dark and disturbing that I'm ashamed to admit. It was a spark of curiosity, a perverse adrenaline. The situation was so surreal, so out of any real life script that a part of me was anesthetized, operating in a distorted mode of survival. The same part that made me accept to go to the porch. His command echoed in my head, touch where no one has ever touched. It was intimate, transgressor, and completely unexpected. The party was still a few feet away, and we were there in our own universe of tension and secrets. He did not move, just waited, giving me all the power of choice, and at the same time, none. This duality was crazy, fear and a kind of morbid fascination. The hatred for him and the awareness that I had put myself in that trap myself. That room, which once represented the apex of my victory, was now the stage of my captivity. And the first act was about to start under the awareness of my captor. I tried to argue. I used the logic. I appealed to our family bond, tried to manipulate. This is crazy. We are family. Think about what you are doing. Every word that I said sounded weak, desperate. I was negotiating with a terrorist who already had the bomb and the detonator in hand. My supplications were useless. He just heard. With an annoying patience, let me exhaust all my arguments. When I finally shut up, breathless and hopeless, he spoke. You still don't understand, are you? There are no more rules. There is no more family, and there is only the video. And what you are willing to do so that it remains our little secret. The word ours hit me hard. He was becoming an accomplice of my own extortion. He was creating forced intimacy, an unhealthy bond that would unite us through this act. Every second that passed, I felt my power, my autonomy, my dignity fading. Being sucked by him, I was an adult, independent, successful woman. And there, in that room, I was nothing. It was a puppet. The ropes were attached to my limbs, and the control was entirely in his hands. The world I knew, where I was in charge of my own life, was undoing in real time, and I was a powerless spectator of my own fall. While I was lost in this whirlwind of panic and impotence, a sound broke the silence between us. A low tinnitus, followed by a shine on the screen of my cell phone, which he was still holding. A notification had arrived. He looked at the screen, and a slow, cruel smile spread through his face. It looks like the game has started officially, he said, turning the screen to me. It was a notification of a social network. Small heart icon and number 1 next to it. The first like in the video of my humiliation. It had happened. The abstract threat had become concrete. That little notification was like the starting shot to my nightmare. Meant that someone, somewhere, had seen. A stranger now was a carrier of my most shameful secret. And according to his rules, it forced me to fulfill a challenge. The first of, who knows, how many? I felt my stomach turn. The taste of tequila and bile rose through my throat. I looked at his face, to his eyes shining with excitement. He was delighting with my terror. Like was not just a number. It was a validation of his power over me. It was proof that your plan had worked perfectly. I was about to say something, a thing to try to stop that madness, when the cell phone vibrated again. This time, the sound seemed louder, sharper. It was a different vibration. It was not a like. It was a sharing notification. My heart stopped. Who would have shared that so fast? My nephew looked at the screen, and for a moment he seemed surprised. His eyes widened a little before they became pure malice. He said nothing, just turned the screen to me again, with her finger pointing to the notification. I needed a second to focus, to read the words that would change everything. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of an atomic bomb. Felino shared his video in the group Familia, the name of the group shown on the screen. Family, WhatsApp's group where my mother sends good morning, where my uncles share photos of the grandchildren, where gossip and congratulations are exchanged. The digital sanctuary of our family. A sound escaped from my throat, a mixture of sob and scream. Of horror, no, it couldn't be. It was the worst possible scenario happening in front of me. It was no longer an anonymous stranger. It was them, all of them. My mother, my uncles, my cousins. His final threat was no longer a threat. Had become reality. The video was there, and they would all see. The world around me has become a blur. The sounds of the party were echoes of a distant planet. The only reality was the screen of that cell phone and the words shared in family. The panic I felt before was a child's joke near the absolute terror that took over me. It was the end. The total and irrevocable humiliation. I looked at my nephew, waiting to see triumph on his face, but his expression was shock. It wasn't me, he said, and for the first time I saw a trace of panic in his eyes too. I posted on a fake private profile. Someone must have found. It's one of our cousins that follows me. Must have seen and thought it was a joke and shared. Apparently, even the monster had lost control of his own creation, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. The bomb had exploded and we were both in the epicenter. He lost control, but I would lose everything. Reputation, the respect of my family, my relationship with my mother. Everything would be reduced to ashes because of a stupid bet. Moved to tequila and pride, I was completely cornered. If I shouted now and exposed it, I would only confirm the veracity of the video for those who still had doubts. If I was quiet, the video would continue there for everyone to see and comment. There was no right movement on the board. Each path led to a different disaster, and the cell phone in his hand began to vibrate non-stop, with the notifications of the family group dot, and that's when I ran away. I grabbed my bag and my cell phone from his hand, which was as shocked as me, and ran out of that apartment. I didn't look back. I ran down the stairs, pushing people in front of me, and only stopped when I arrived in the sand of the beach, my heart looking like I was going out of the mouth. I have been hidden in a hotel for a few blocks since then. My cell phone doesn't stop playing. Messages and calls of my mother, my uncles, my cousins, and his. Dozens of his messages, some apologizing, others trying to blackmail me again to solve it together. I didn't answer any. The video was erased from the group a few minutes later, probably by him or some cousin who realized the severity of the situation. But the damage has already been done. Who saw, saw. I don't know how to face my family again, and I don't know what to do with him. Part of me wants to go to the police, but how do I explain everything that happened? How do I explain the bet, the challenge, my part of all this? And this is where I am now, alone with fear and not knowing the next step. And that's why I'm telling you this story, because I have no one to turn to. I need advice, a light. What do I do? Should I confront it? Should I tell my whole truth to my family? Or should I just disappear? Your decision in the comments can change everything. Please help me and subscribe, because I think this story is far from over.